Once upon a time, Betty Crocker was not just a name on a cookbook. She was the voice of every American kitchen, a trusted friend guiding millions through the rhythms of daily life. Her recipes were more than instructions, they were symbols of comfort, celebration, and creativity that shaped mid-century America. But over the years, many of her most remarkable dishes quietly disappeared, lost beneath the waves of modern convenience. Today, we are turning back the pages of time to rediscover 15 forgotten Betty Crocker creations that once defined the heart of American cooking. From golden soufflé rings and corn pimento molds to brandy-soaked puddings and chiffon cakes, each recipe carries a memory of post-war optimism, family gatherings, and the art of homemade perfection. These are not just meals, they are edible time capsules from an era that believed love could be baked, stirred, and served warm. So, if you have ever wondered what America's kitchens once smelled like when joy was measured in teaspoons and faith in flour, then stay with me. Because today, America's Lost Recipes is bringing back the forgotten taste of Betty Crocker's America. In the 1950s, when afternoons moved at a gentler pace, the comforting aroma of baked treats often filled American homes. Among the most beloved was the brown sugar and walnut date square, a humble yet elegant dessert that bridged the line between a cookie and a bar. It was the kind of sweet you packed into lunchboxes, served at church socials, or paired with a fresh pot of coffee after Sunday dinner. The beauty of this recipe lay in its simplicity. Chopped dates were simmered until soft and sweet, then spread like jam between layers of crumbly brown sugar and walnut oat mixture. The result was rich, buttery, and perfectly balanced, crisp at the edges, tender at the center, and fragrant with nostalgia that lingered long after the last bite. These squares reflected a time when baking was more than a routine, it was a quiet act of love and pride. Housewives of the era trusted Betty Crocker's tested methods, ensuring that every batch emerged golden, even, and inviting. Even the walnuts, toasted lightly, added more than flavor, they brought warmth, texture, and that unmistakable homemade touch that defined a true mid-century dessert. Each bite tells a story of vintage kitchens filled with ticking timers, floral aprons, and the soft chatter of family waiting eagerly for dessert. Today, the brown sugar and walnut date square stands as a forgotten heirloom of American baking, proof that comfort can be created from the simplest ingredients. It reminds us that sweetness was once measured in effort and care, not excess. So, as we revisit these vintage treasures, remember, every recipe has a memory, and every memory has a taste worth rediscovering. In the glamorous dining rooms of mid-century America, a dish's presentation mattered almost as much as its flavor. The crab-filled cheese soufflé ring was one of those dazzling creations that made any homemaker feel like a professional chef. It was not just a recipe, it was a performance, light, airy, and beautifully dramatic when served fresh from the oven. This dish captured the 1950s fascination with elegance and experimentation. Soufflés were considered sophisticated, but Betty Crocker made them accessible, transforming a once intimidating dish into a centerpiece any confident home cook could master. The base was a delicate cheese soufflé, baked in a ring mold until golden and puffed. The center was then filled with a creamy crab mixture, seasoned gently with lemon, parsley, and a whisper of paprika for color and aroma. Each slice offered a contrast of textures, the airy soufflé, the rich crab filling, and the comforting warmth of melted cheese. It represented a time when dinner parties were grand events and recipes were chosen to impress not through excess, but through grace and detail. The crab-filled cheese soufflé ring spoke of optimism, creativity, and pride in presentation. It was a symbol of an America rebuilding its confidence after the war, eager to embrace sophistication at the dinner table. Today, it remains a forgotten treasure, a glimpse into an era when food was art, and every meal was an occasion worth celebrating. Restoring it to memory is not only about flavor but about honoring the women and families who found joy in making something extraordinary from the ordinary. There was a time when the ring mold ruled American dining tables, a symbol of both creativity and precision. Among the most colorful of these dishes was the savory corn pimento ring with cheesy sauce, a showpiece that blended comfort with cheerful mid-century flair. It was hearty, wholesome, and unmistakably American, a dish designed to bring warmth and color to even the simplest of meals. This recipe first appeared in the post-war years, when homemakers were inspired by innovation and presentation. Canned corn, a pantry staple of the 1950s, was mixed with diced pimentos, eggs, and a touch of flour to form a tender baked ring. The beauty came in the serving. The golden corn ring, carefully unmolded, was crowned with a silky cheese sauce that flowed through its center like molten sunshine. Every bite delivered a balance of sweetness from the corn and a mild tang from the pimentos, wrapped in the creamy comfort of cheddar. It was not extravagant, but it felt special, the kind of recipe that made weekday dinners feel like small celebrations. Betty Crocker's purpose with dishes like this was simple: to make home cooking feel inventive without being intimidating. The ring mold added elegance, the ingredients kept it familiar. Together, they reflected an America learning to blend efficiency with artistry, using what was on hand to create something memorable. Today, the savory corn pimento ring with cheesy sauce reminds us that even the humblest ingredients can become a statement of care. It is a forgotten echo of family dinners filled with laughter, conversation, and gratitude, proof that food does not need extravagance to be beautiful. It only needs heart, patience, and a touch of melted cheese. In the golden age of home baking, few desserts carried as much quiet charm as the ginger pear upside-down cakelet. Small, elegant, and irresistibly fragrant, it was the kind of treat that made ordinary afternoons feel like special occasions. Unlike the grand pineapple versions that often stole the spotlight, this cakelet offered something more refined, a balance of spice, fruit, and tenderness that captured the warmth of homemade hospitality. Born from the creativity of mid-century homemakers, this recipe took advantage of seasonal pears, gently poached until glistening and soft. Slices were arranged in the base of a small pan, glazed with butter and brown sugar, then topped with a ginger-scented batter that baked into golden perfection. When turned out, the result was a shimmering mosaic of caramelized pears resting on a moist, spiced cake that perfumed the entire kitchen. What made it unforgettable was its intimacy. Each cakelet served one or two, small enough to feel personal, yet rich enough to leave a memory. The hint of ginger gave it depth, while the pears brought natural sweetness and comfort, reminding families of autumn harvests and candlelit suppers. In the 1950s, recipes like this represented care and mindfulness. Baking was never rushed, it was an act of love performed with precision and patience. Betty Crocker's guidance ensured that even beginner bakers could achieve grace on a plate. Today, the ginger pear upside-down cakelet feels like a whisper from the past, delicate, aromatic, and quietly elegant. It asks us to slow down, to remember that beauty often hides in the smallest moments, and that a simple cake can still capture the soul of an era when sweetness was handmade, heartfelt, and truly shared. In mid-century America, when international flavors began to quietly enter suburban kitchens, one dish stood out for its boldness and charm: the curried chicken and rice ring with peas. It was not authentically Indian, nor purely American, but something delightfully in between, a reflection of curiosity, creativity, and the optimism of post-war home cooking. This recipe appeared at a time when curry powder was considered exotic, a gateway to faraway flavors without leaving the comfort of home. Betty Crocker encouraged homemakers to experiment with it gently, adding just enough spice to intrigue the palate, but not overwhelm it. The dish began with tender pieces of cooked chicken, folded into a creamy, curry-scented sauce, then combined with fluffy white rice and bright green peas. The mixture was pressed into a ring mold, baked until firm, and turned out like a crown, golden, aromatic, and ready to serve. In the center, a pool of rich sauce was poured, often garnished with almonds or parsley for a touch of elegance. Each spoonful blended comfort with adventure, a balance between the familiar and the new. To serve this dish was to show confidence. It told guests that the hostess was both modern and imaginative, willing to embrace flavor without abandoning tradition. Today, the curried chicken and rice ring with peas stands as a delicious snapshot of America's culinary awakening, a moment when home cooks learned that flavor had no borders. Forgotten by time, it remains a reminder of how innovation once began not in restaurants, but in family kitchens, where every meal told a story of pride, discovery, and love served warm around the table. Before modern desserts filled boxes and freezers, warmth came from the oven, and few recipes captured that comfort better than the old-fashioned apple brandy bread pudding. It was a dish born from thrift, elevated by imagination. Families turned leftover bread into something extraordinary, blending tradition with a quiet sense of grace. This version, inspired by Betty Crocker's mid-century kitchen, brought a refined twist to the humble pudding. Cubes of day-old bread were soaked in a custard of milk, eggs, sugar, and a touch of vanilla. But what transformed it from ordinary to unforgettable was the addition of brandy-soaked apples, soft, spiced, and aromatic. As the pudding baked, the fragrance filled every corner of the home, mingling cinnamon, caramel, and the faint warmth of spirits. When served, each spoonful carried layers of texture, the crisp edges, the silky custard, the tender fruit beneath. A drizzle of warm cream or a sprinkle of powdered sugar completed the experience, reminding everyone that luxury did not need extravagance. In the 1940s and 1950s, bread pudding represented resilience and care. It was a dessert that made use of what was available, yet tasted like something made for celebration. It embodied the belief that resourcefulness and love could turn simplicity into beauty. Today, the old-fashioned apple brandy bread pudding stands as a quiet masterpiece of American comfort. It invites us to slow down, to remember that dessert was once more than sweetness, it was memory itself, baked into every bite. Bringing it back is not just reviving a recipe, it is reclaiming a piece of the warmth that once defined home. In the sunlit kitchens of the 1950s, desserts were not only about taste, they were about presentation, charm, and balance. The lemon almond pudding square was one of those graceful creations that embodied the beauty of simplicity. Light, fragrant, and softly golden, it was a dessert that brightened tables and lifted spirits with every bite. This recipe blended two beloved mid-century flavors, the citrus tang of lemon and the nutty warmth of almonds. The process began with a smooth batter of eggs, milk, sugar, and flour, gently infused with fresh lemon zest and almond extract. As it baked, something magical happened. The batter separated into two delicate layers. The top formed a tender sponge cake, while the bottom transformed into a silky, custard-like pudding. When cooled and cut into squares, the dessert revealed its quiet sophistication. A dusting of powdered sugar added elegance, while toasted almond slivers gave texture and fragrance. Served chilled or slightly warm, It offered a balance that was both refreshing and comforting, bright enough for summer, yet soothing enough for winter evenings. Betty Crocker promoted desserts like this to remind homemakers that beauty did not require complexity. It was about care, timing, and trust in the oven's gentle rhythm. Each lemon almond pudding square reflected pride in craftsmanship and the belief that joy could be found in the smallest details. Today, this forgotten gem reminds us of an era when dessert was an expression of hospitality, not excess. The lemon almond pudding square invites us to rediscover that balance of flavor and feeling, where sweetness was measured not in sugar, but in sincerity. Before breakfast became rushed and routine, mornings in America began with the slow rhythm of baking. The heirloom cornmeal and brown sugar muffin was a quiet staple of those early hours, simple, nourishing, and filled with warmth. It carried the legacy of generations who believed that the first meal of the day should feed both body and spirit. This recipe reflected a time when cornmeal was treasured in every pantry. It linked the farms of the South to the kitchens of the Midwest, uniting regions through shared tradition. The batter combined coarse cornmeal with flour, eggs, milk, and butter, sweetened gently with brown sugar instead of white. That small change made all the difference, giving the muffins a golden hue, a caramel depth, and a tender crumb that stayed moist long after baking. Served warm, they were often brushed with melted butter or drizzled with honey, the aroma filling kitchens with a sense of calm and comfort. Housewives baked them not for guests, but for family, for husbands heading to work, children before school, or neighbors stopping by with morning news. Betty Crocker celebrated recipes like this because they honored American roots. They represented thrift, care, and connection, everyday virtues baked into humble forms. The cornmeal, coarse and honest, told the story of a nation built on resilience. The brown sugar added a touch of kindness that made each bite memorable. Today, the heirloom cornmeal and brown sugar muffin feels like a forgotten whisper from simpler times. It reminds us that the most meaningful recipes are often the most modest, born not from indulgence, but from love, patience, and the desire to make an ordinary morning taste extraordinary. There was a time when salads were not leafy afterthoughts but centerpiece creations, carefully layered, chilled, and proudly displayed. The cream cheese and cottage cheese layered salad was one of those mid-century marvels that turned simplicity into spectacle. It was cool, creamy, and strikingly elegant, served from a glass dish that revealed every thoughtful layer beneath its glossy surface. This salad was a staple of bridge luncheons, Sunday suppers, and holiday gatherings. Its base began with soft cottage cheese, blended until smooth and flecked with salt and pepper. Over it came a layer of whipped cream cheese, folded with lemon juice for brightness and chopped celery for a subtle crunch. Many homemakers added diced pineapple or pimento for color, transforming the dish into something cheerful and fresh. Once chilled, the salad was garnished with crisp lettuce leaves and a dusting of paprika. The texture was delicate but satisfying, creamy, cool, and gently tangy, offering a welcome contrast to heavier casseroles and roasts. Betty Crocker encouraged salads like this because they embodied balance and beauty. They brought lightness to the American table, proving that elegance could exist even in the simplest ingredients. In the 1950s, serving such a dish was a mark of pride, a reflection of care, order, and the joy of hospitality. Today, the cream cheese and cottage cheese layered salad reminds us of an era when meals were artfully arranged, not hurried. It celebrates patience, presentation, and the belief that food should please both the eye and the heart. Restoring it now reconnects us with that spirit, when every layer, like every moment shared, was meant to be savored slowly. In the years following World War II, American kitchens began to rediscover European comfort food, hearty, simple, and deeply satisfying. Among those rediscovered treasures was the German-style potato and bacon bake, a dish that celebrated the bond between thrift and flavor. It was the kind of meal that brought families together around the dinner table, filling both the stomach and the soul. This recipe was built from humble ingredients that every pantry held dear: potatoes, onions, bacon, and cream. Thinly sliced potatoes were layered in a casserole dish with crisp bits of bacon and caramelized onions, then bathed in a light cream sauce. As it baked, the layers melded together into something golden, smoky, and irresistibly rich. The aroma alone could draw a family from every corner of the house. What made this dish special was its heart. It reflected the resilience of homemakers who transformed simplicity into nourishment. Each layer told a story of resourcefulness: how bacon added depth, how cream softened edges, and how potatoes, the most modest ingredient of all, became the foundation of comfort itself. Betty Crocker introduced versions of this dish during the 1950s, recognizing its timeless appeal. It was practical enough for weeknights yet indulgent enough for Sunday dinners. Served with crusty bread or a crisp green salad, it felt like a complete meal, one that spoke of care, patience, and the quiet triumph of home cooking. Today, the German-style potato and bacon bake reminds us of an era when food was made to satisfy both hunger and heart. It carries the warmth of old kitchens, the laughter of shared meals, and the enduring truth that good flavor never fades, it simply waits to be remembered. In the heat of a 1950s summer, when ovens stayed off and sweet relief came chilled, the Blackberry cream cheese icebox pie reigned supreme. It was the kind of dessert that captured the spirit of the season: cool, creamy, and bursting with color. Housewives adored it not only for its beauty but for its simplicity, proof that elegance could be achieved without ever lighting the stove. This recipe began with a crumb crust made from crushed vanilla wafers or graham crackers, pressed firmly into a pie dish and chilled. The filling was a smooth blend of cream cheese, whipped cream, and sugar, folded together until light as silk. Fresh or preserved blackberries were swirled through the mixture, their deep purple hues creating marbled ribbons of flavor and artistry. After resting in the refrigerator overnight, the pie set to a perfect, sliceable texture, velvety, cool, and just tart enough to balance the sweetness. A final layer of glossy blackberry topping gave it the allure of a bakery showpiece. What made this dessert timeless was its emotion. It felt like summer captured on a plate, laughter on porches, the hum of cicadas, and the joy of a chilled slice shared after supper. Betty Crocker's versions of icebox pies brought a touch of luxury to everyday life, proving that convenience did not mean compromise. Today, the Blackberry cream cheese icebox pie reminds us of that golden balance between effort and ease. It belongs to a slower world where flavor had patience, and joy could be found in something as simple as a pie kept cool until evening, waiting to be savored one nostalgic bite at a time. In the bustling kitchens of mid-century America, efficiency and flavor were not enemies. The glazed meatloaf, time-saver style embodied this philosophy perfectly. It was a dish designed for busy homemakers who wanted hearty, satisfying dinners without hours of preparation, yet it still carried the warmth and pride of a homemade meal. This recipe combined ground beef with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings, molded into a loaf, and brushed with a glossy glaze, often a mixture of ketchup, brown sugar, and a touch of mustard. The glaze caramelized in the oven, creating a savory sweet crust that sealed in juiciness. Baking transformed humble ingredients into something comforting, aromatic, and visually appealing, filling kitchens with the scent of home. What made this meatloaf enduring was its balance of practicality and care. It could be prepared quickly, yet each bite reminded families that effort and thought had been invested. The caramelized glaze was more than flavor, it was reassurance, a signal that dinner was ready, and that the table would bring people together. Betty Crocker promoted recipes like this in the 1950s as solutions for the modern homemaker. They were adaptable, dependable, and designed to instill confidence. Yet, they also reflected an era when meals were not merely about sustenance but about connection, about gathering family around the table, sharing stories, and savoring the comfort of familiarity. Today, the glazed meatloaf, time-saver style stands as a reminder that convenience and care can coexist. Forgotten by modern kitchens, it remains a testament to an America where resourcefulness, flavor, and warmth met in every loaf, a dish that satisfied more than hunger, nourishing both body and heart. In mid-century American kitchens, presentation was as important as flavor, and the orange marmalade glazed chicken lattice was a shining example. It was a dish that transformed an everyday ingredient into a centerpiece, glossy, aromatic, and visually stunning. Families admired it not only for its taste but for the elegance it brought to the table. This recipe began with tender chicken pieces, arranged in a lattice pattern to create a delicate, structured presentation. The glaze, a mixture of tangy orange marmalade, a touch of vinegar, and a hint of mustard, was brushed over the chicken, caramelizing as it baked. The result was a golden, shiny finish that highlighted both craftsmanship and flavor. The sweetness of the marmalade complemented the savory meat perfectly, while the lattice design allowed the glaze to seep into every crevice, ensuring every bite was flavorful and aromatic. It was the kind of dish that made family dinners feel celebratory, even on ordinary nights. Betty Crocker popularized recipes like this in the 1950s, encouraging homemakers to bring creativity and sophistication into everyday meals. The lattice was more than decoration, it was a demonstration of care, precision, and pride in cooking. Guests and family alike recognized the effort, savoring not just the taste, but the experience of sharing something special. Today, the orange marmalade glazed chicken lattice is a forgotten gem of American cuisine. It reminds us that beauty and flavor often go hand in hand, and that the most memorable meals are crafted with thoughtfulness. Rediscovering it allows us to honor the traditions, skill, and love that defined kitchens of the past, where even a simple chicken could shine as a centerpiece of warmth and celebration. In the kitchens of the 1950s, simple vegetables were elevated to elegance with a little creativity and care. Creamed peas with golden croutons was one of those understated dishes that brought charm, texture, and comfort to the table. It was humble yet refined, a side that could accompany both weeknight dinners and celebratory meals. The recipe began with fresh or frozen peas, cooked gently until tender. A creamy sauce of butter, milk, and a touch of flour enveloped each pea, creating a smooth, luxurious coating. The dish was finished with croutons, toasted to a golden crisp, sprinkled on top to provide contrast in texture and a subtle nuttiness. Every bite balanced softness and crunch, mild sweetness and buttery richness. Betty Crocker's recipes encouraged home cooks to find delight in these small details. In an era when presentation mattered, even a vegetable side could impress. The golden croutons were not merely decorative, they represented the thoughtfulness that defined mid-century American home cooking, care in preparation, attention to color and texture, and the desire to transform ordinary ingredients into something memorable. Creamed peas with golden croutons was more than nourishment, it was a testament to comfort, simplicity, and pride in domestic artistry. Families gathered to enjoy it alongside roasts, casseroles, or baked chicken, savoring both the flavor and the effort behind it. Today, this forgotten side dish reminds us that elegance does not always require complexity. It invites us to slow down, to appreciate texture, color, and care, and to remember that even the simplest foods can create lasting memories. Rediscovering it reconnects us with a time when every dish told a story, and every meal reflected warmth, attention, and heart.